The talking stops in about 72 hours, but until then, we will keep talking. It's Georgia, Ohio State national semifinal at the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Head on over there, check out Pat's work. Pat, how you doing there from Atlanta?
I'm good. Once we got down here and dealt with all the travel issues coming from Ohio, things have been good. The weather's warming up a little bit down here, so nothing to complain about at this point.
All right. Well, a lot of people would like that Ohio State defense to warm up a little bit in comparison to what we saw against Michigan. And again, so much is made of whether you take the positive approach or the negative approach. The final result was, of course, nothing but negative, and the yardage totals. And if you take it all together, negative about what the team gave up with the 45 points and the yardage total and the big plays. You take the big plays out, and they played 90% of the plays well. And so Jim Knowles kind of addressed that, and you kind of looked that over this week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I completely understand the upset, anger, whatever of Ohio State fans. I think it's justified. You can't lose to Michigan twice. That's just not what this team is used to. This program has gone so long without having this issue that when it happens, people have a reason to be angry and upset. But I think on the flip side, you have to look that they're still in the playoff and they do have this chance. And now that they have the chance, how do you take advantage of it? And so when you look back at the Michigan game, I think you have to take the positives too. You know, the first half, they were doing a pretty good job defensively against Michigan. Obviously, there were a couple big plays there, but you know that those teams are going to score some points. We were talking with Jack Sawyer, Ohio State defensive end, and you know, he made the comment like he thought they were pretty physical for 2+ quarters before Michigan really was able to get anything going rushing wise. I don't remember what their rushing total was at halftime, but it was pretty low.
It was 10 yards.
Yeah. And so, you know, that those are positives to look at from that game. Now, conversely, you have to take and see what went wrong. Obviously, some of the big plays in the passing game, you know, you don't make a tackle if you're Cameron Brown. You have two defensive backs run into each other on another play. Things like that don't go your way and have to be fixed. But Jim Knowles made the comment that you can't overreact to one bad play, a few explosive plays, even one loss. Now you have to take it and learn from it again. But I think there is this, difference between coaches and players who are certainly still upset. They thought their season was over. And then handling that that's different from kind of the fan reaction, and even fans that, really do watch the game and know a lot about it. There's just a different level of emotion. The players have to get past it and go back to work, and that's what they've been doing. So now that you've said all that, you've got to go out against Georgia and execute better than those plays, right? Let's be clear. Georgia's probably going to score some points in this game. There's probably going to be some big plays, probably on both sides. But you have to show that you learned from these plays that you're talking about and prove, if you're Jack Sawyer saying, as he did in not so many words, that basically we think we're a better defense than that showed on that day. We think we're a physical defense, a tough defense, all those things. Well, now you have your opportunity against the defending national champions, the number one team in the country. It's all there for Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball to kind of put this narrative of, not tough enough, not able to make the plays, those type of things. You can put that all to bed by beating the best team in the country according to the rankings. And, that'll all come down to how well they play on Saturday. So I think while some may be concerned about that, I think the Buckeyes are looking at it as an opportunity to show that this defense really can get the job done, and maybe just it was a bad quarter and a half, however long you want to put it, against Michigan that has kind of changed the narrative back again.
We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports, breaking down Ohio State, Georgia, national semifinal, of course, New Year's Eve in Atlanta. If we flip to the offensive side of this, while Georgia produced the best defense that we've seen in years or decades last year, they were pretty much able to match that, maybe not quite to the extent statistically, but most people would consider it the best defense in the country when you put the metrics together with the talent. But if there does, beyond this Georgia air of invincibility, seem to be a place where Ohio State could exploit them because of their talent, portion that they have, certainly at the wide receiver position and in the passing game, it would be just that. And then you put it together with what we saw in the SEC championship game, and there seems to be a path there for Ohio State.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because we're here in Atlanta, and one of the major talking points was, well, Mayan Williams didn't come to interviews when he was scheduled to. They replaced him with Chip Trayanum on Tuesday. Turns out, according to Ohio State, Mayan Williams is sick. We went to practice today. He wasn't there, and everyone's rightfully concerned about that. We'll see what happens at that situation, but it's going to be tough for Ohio State to run the ball against this number 1 ranked Georgia rush defense, no matter which running backs out there. Obviously, you'd love to have as many talented running backs as possible. But like you said, I think the path to success offensively, while you still have to run the ball some, is to throw the ball in this Georgia defense. I think they're just inside the top 50 nationally in pass defense. Maybe it's 49. Teams have proven. You mentioned LSU. They did a good job with Tennessee, but teams have been able to throw on this Georgia defense. The secondary is not as vaunted as it has been in the past. And then you mentioned C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Cade Stover, Julian Fleming. You've got to play to your strengths if you're Ohio State. And the last 2 years with C.J. Stroud throwing the football, the strengths have been throwing the football. So I think that's a route for Ohio State to really attack this Georgia defense, and they have to be willing to do some different things. I was talking with some of the other writers here the other night, and it was pointed out, and I think this was a good point, that Ohio State is almost made it more complicated on themselves in the passing attack. Gone are the days of, the simple mesh routes and things that they used to do with, Johnny Dixon, Terry McLaurin, Paris Campbell, that group. And that was really successful. Now you have a more talented quarterback throwing the ball. You have more talented receivers. So you can do some things where C.J. Stroud can put the ball right in the hands over the top of Marvin Harrison Jr. But that doesn't have to be every passing play. You can do some things that just get guys into space, for instance. Watching some of these bowl games that have happened so far, it's been, okay, how are these guys, these teams that aren't as good as Ohio State, don't have the weapons that Ohio State have, how are they scheming guys open for, even simple passes that go for 10, 15 yards? Now, obviously, they're not playing Georgia, but they don't have the talent of Ohio State. So I think it's, maybe not overthinking things as much. But certainly I think the passing attack is a key to success. Even, I'd take some shots early and often against this group, whether it be Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, whoever. I'd have that at least one option on some of the early pass plays, and, see if you can't come out and punch Georgia in the mouth. If Ohio State, say, gets the ball first or stops Georgia on the first drive, and you can get a 50-yard Marvin Harrison touchdown like they did late in the first half against Michigan. Okay, now Georgia's playing from behind a little bit, and if you can cause some doubt about how they're defending these receivers, I think that's advantage Ohio State, right? So that would be my key to the game is how you can attack them. Like I said, you still have to be able to run the ball. I still think the Buckeyes have to have some form of balance. I wouldn't go full air raid in this one, but I do think, let's use the guys that you've got, and they certainly have talent in the passing attack.
Trouble is somebody's got to block those guys up front. So the pass protection, though, against Michigan, I thought was more than adequate. I thought it was really good most of the time against a really good pass rush.
I agree. Ohio State's offensive line I wouldn't say is elite. They weren't a Joe Moore Award finalist like Georgia's was, but I do think it's good. Georgia's pass rush comes largely up the middle. Jalen Carter's the main name, but they certainly have guys that can cause issues. So it's going to be a challenge. Matthew Jones, the right guard, didn't play against Michigan. He was in pads when we were out at practice, but we only saw about 15 minutes, and they weren't really in offensive line drills too much. So it was tough to say how much he's doing, but it's good to see him out there after he hurt I think it was his ankle. He had a brace on that today. So it will be interesting to see how they handle a guy like Jalen Carter. And obviously you don't want to put too much attention on one guy and then have other guys on that defensive line have big days. But yeah, I mean, as key as it is to be able to throw the ball downfield, you have to be able to protect in order to do that. So that'll be vital. You've seen Ohio State in the past, offensive lines in the college football playoff. You've seen a mixed bag. And I think when Ohio State has had success in the college football playoff, you can point to offensive line success. And, when you lose 31-0 to Clemson, not that was the only issue, but I think the offensive line that year wasn't as good as maybe they thought. So certainly CJ Stroud, especially when you have a quarterback like CJ Stroud, who is not going to be able to escape and take off like some of the other quarterbacks of the past. You've got to get him the time he needs. And if you're going to do what I said and take some of those shots, that takes even more time to get them downfield.
Pat, you brought up 31-0 against Clemson in 2016. I was actually going to go there for this reason. That was a pick'em game by Vegas, and Ohio State gets blown out. I didn't anticipate that happening. I didn't see that coming. So there's a result that, for me at least, I thought that was going to be a competitive game, really close game. Ohio State probably going to win. I think they were a slight favorite, and they get blown out. But going into a game, I cannot remember going into a game having this much uncertainty about how good this team is. I know how talented they are.
Right.
I just don't know how good they are, where their heads are at. And I can't even go back in time and think of a game this big, a playoff game, a BCS championship or bowl game, where I just didn't have a good read on the team. And to me, they're a bit of a wild card.
Well, I think, when was the last time they lost to Michigan and were in a situation to, play in a game like this? Yeah. I think, it goes, for me, it keeps going back to that game. Sure, there were issues against Penn State. They weren't great against Maryland, but if they find a way to beat Michigan, even if it's a ugly, close, if that second half kind of plays out like the first half, and it doesn't look great, but you do it. I think there are still some questions for sure about this team. I think there's questions about Georgia. I just think that the fact that is the last memory Buckeye fans and media, people around the country, whoever have of the Buckeyes, that creates those questions. You're not coming in on a win and then a Big Ten championship game and whatnot. I obviously wasn't covering Georgia last year, but I imagine there were some pretty legitimate questions about that team after they lost Alabama. I believe game wasn't even really that close.
17 points.
Yeah. So in the SEC championship game, and obviously we know how that story ended. They go on and win the national championship, beating Alabama in that game, which could be the story we've got here, slightly different without it being a conference championship game. But I've said it a lot these last few weeks. I may have said it to you, Mark. This was the number 2 team in the country almost the entire season. The talent, as you said, is there to play with and potentially beat Georgia. The question you said of, they're talented, you're not sure just how really good they are. To me, that's somewhat on the players, but also very much on the coaches. The handling of the situation when you have that much talent is it seems easy, right? You just, you call the plays and the guys go execute, and it's not, but I think it's fair to question Ryan Day and some of the coaches on his staff about, why they haven't been able to completely maximize this talent, because in addition to the Michigan game, they didn't play probably a full 60-minute game all season. even in the games where they won by a lot, I think you can nitpick quite a bit. And, I think that's probably true about any team in any season. But just to me, it felt like there was more of that this year, even in the convincing wins. So, this should be, I said this on a show I did yesterday. This should be Ohio State as the underdog, as the number 4 team in the country. Like, pressure's all on Georgia to go win the national championship again. And it feels like, yeah, there's certainly pressure on Georgia. And, maybe I'm too close to the Ohio State side of things, but there is definitely pressure on Ohio State that's been created because of all the questions about the coaching and the way they finished the recruiting class didn't help things either, because it wasn't like there was a boost from, landing a couple of those 5-star kids that they missed out on. So I think it's generated some more pressure on Ryan Day and the staff and these players that didn't need to be there in other circumstances.
I made the same explanation to somebody recently. I said, while the narrative for most 4 seeds in the playoffs is it's house money, glad to be here, let's take our shot. With Ohio State, this is the expectation.
Yeah.
Basically every year, but especially this year. So that's not the pressure's not off of this program or this team. It's so fascinating from the standpoint that if they lose to Georgia, now in my book, if they play really well and lose to Georgia, I don't think there are serious issues with this program in any such way. Like, if they lose 35-31, it's a colossal game, great game, and Georgia may go on as expected and win a national championship. Shoot, you just had 2 great teams on the field and somebody had to lose.
Right.
But especially if they lose and get dominated coming off the Michigan game, they're going to go into an offseason and there's going to be uncertainty and questions, and people are going to be upset like anything we haven't seen in quite some time, versus this could be one of the greatest redemption stories in the history of college football.
Yeah.
That I can't think of anything like it if they're able to pull this off.
Yeah, and that's where I think that pressure is. I'm sure Ryan Day, and name your coach/player who will be back next year, who isn't aware of that, what the narrative will be and whatnot. I think even that Clemson game we were talking about, coming out of that, yeah, there were a lot of questions. You needed to fix a lot of things that offseason, but there was like confidence that it would be done, I felt like, if I remember correctly. And I feel like if it's a similar situation and not like the time that Ohio State lost close to Clemson in 2019, I think, I don't feel that there is that same level of confidence in the fan base, and even, in the media, frankly. So, yeah, it certainly puts that added pressure on them. Now, pressure can be a good thing. I mean, there's that expression about pressure and diamonds, and I don't know exactly how it is, but this is a big test for these guys. I mean, you want pressure if you're Ohio State, because that means you're playing in these games, right? So again, they just have to go out and do it. And, you can't get too crazy with things, but I also think you've got to let loose a little bit. And, I felt like Ryan Day, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, they called that game against Michigan tight. And, maybe it was, he was just concerned. He didn't want to do anything that might lose them the game for a second year in a row. He knows what a big deal it was. But, I think if you play a little loose in that first half, maybe you score another touchdown and it's a completely different game at the half and whatnot. So, I think you've got to just go out and play. This is an important game. It's a big game, but the only way I think they really have success is just like, take some shots, do some different things. Hopefully they have a play or two, that they designed, maybe not a poorly executed fake punt like against Michigan, but, some things that you haven't shown this year that, you've had a month plus now to work on some stuff. The last time they were in this situation in the 2014 season against Alabama, granted, Urban Meyer and a completely different staff, completely different players, but wide receiver Evan Spencer threw a touchdown, like something like that maybe you don't need it because the game goes your way, but have something ready if you do, and make sure you've practiced it enough that, like that fake punt, it doesn't get screwed up. I think Buckeye fans would hope you don't have to do that, But then I think you think back to that Alabama game, and that Michael Thomas catch is one of the memories that everyone always talks about, other than the Ezekiel Elliott run. So have something ready, play fun, play loose, you know, and like you said, if you lose a close one to the best team in the country, you know, I think most people will realize that this, you know, what that is. There will always be people that are going to be very negative and whatnot, but I think you've just got to play, you know, go out and play.
Pat Murphy, Bucknuts, 247 Sports. Get on over there. Get yourself prepped for Ohio State and Georgia. Pat, enjoy the rest of your trip, the game, and we will talk to you after the aftermath, whatever that might be.
All right. Sounds good, Mark.